Welcome to episode 69 of the Food Grads Podcast, the podcast where we explore careers in the food, beverage, and agricultural industries. I'm your host, Veronica Hislop, a Ph.D. candidate in molecular science and career partner with Food Grads. This week on the podcast, I interviewed Sripad Josei, Ph.D., operations manager at Ardra Inc. Ardra Inc. is harnessing the power of engineering biology to solve pressing problems in the sustainable supply of natural ingredients. They use designer biochemical pathways to produce high-value ingredients for cosmetics, beverages, and pharmaceutical industries using renewable sugars. On this episode, Sripad shared with me what he does at Ardra Inc. and how they use fermentation to create tailored molecules. Sripad shared with me his PhD journey, coming from India to Canada, and completing his PhD at McGill University for plant sciences, and finding a job after his internship after his PhD. We spent a lot of time focusing on what it's like doing a PhD. And just because you're working at a school, it doesn't mean that it is school. And knowing that fact can help you translate that knowledge to the working world. Sripad explained to me how you take those skills, market yourself, and show that your PhD is an asset. As well, that finding a job is sometimes just found by going back to the basics, networking, and cold emailing. So if you are a student who's graduating soon with a postgraduate degree, such as a master's or PhD, then you need to listen to this episode. Sripad explained so eloquently about how a PhD is more than school. So that's it for this introduction. Let's get on with the show. So thank you so much, Sripad, for taking time to come on the show. I had been looking for people who are in your field of work, and I was so happy when we were able to finally connect, and I learned more about kind of the experience that you've gone through doing a PhD and such, and moving into the industry role. And I think a lot of students would appreciate to hear some of your insight, because I know from stories I've heard that it could be a struggle to switch from that academia to the industry. So thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you, Veronica. It's nice to have you.
Well, to get us started, I always like to go in and find out about what you're doing currently right now. I'll let you take it away. Why don't you introduce yourself and let us know what you do?
Great. Hi, my name is Sripad Josei. Currently, I'm working as operations manager in a small startup. Our name is Ardra Inc. And we specialize in making food and cosmetic ingredients, very specialized ingredients, using fermentation technology and using engineering microbes. So that's like our platform technology that we use in different kinds of food and cosmetic ingredients. That's what my current company does. And my role is operations manager at the company. So I look at all the overall operations, helping you with the daily tasks and managing most of the administrative, HR, a little bit of finance, and a bit of most of operations that the company runs. If that's my current role.
Wow, it sounds like you're in a lot of different roles.
Yes, usually startups, they have this kind of structure where there's no specific department to start, right? Like it's more of a mixed culture and you get to learn a lot. You do a lot of things.
Well, one thing that stood out to me is, again, you did mention fermentation, which I think is a very, I want to say trendy, but I can understand why it's a trendy aspect to look at in agriculture right now. For those who maybe don't know well, what is fermentation, at least in this context?
Okay, so fermentation is basically using microorganisms to drive a chemical reaction, in a reactor or a fermenter. It's very similar to alcohol fermentation or making wine or beer. It's as simple as that. But in our case, we use precision fermentation. So ideally, we know what organisms we are using, which are engineered in the lab, which we are using to make a specific product using a raw material or an input substrate. So that's a very precise fermentation or chemical reaction that we obtain using the precision fermentation technology. Alcohol fermentation or making wine or beer is more crude, and this is more precise, but the technology of fermentation is still the same. It's using microbes to drive up a chemical reaction and making ingredients. That's how simple it is.
Okay. See, that would make sense because I could imagine, like, maybe in the beer making process, you're not trying to find as very specific, I want this molecule, or I want, you're just looking for an overall flavor. Like, you are playing around with fermentation, but maybe with your operations currently, it's really trying to nail this particular one, and that's what would make it precision, correct?
Yes, that's correct. And also precision because we use engineered microbes. We don't use general yeast strains, which are used in old techniques like beer making. But we
Oh,
use bacteria or fungi for that matter, which are engineered, bioengineered to make a specific compound, make a specific reaction happen inside the fermenter.
okay.
That's why we call it precision fermentation.
Okay. That is so cool.
And as difficult as it sounds easy, it's challenging, but it's fun and it's exciting to work on this technology.
Oh, that is so cool. I could see why, because I guess that would be because you're using organisms, right? Like that would make it a natural process. Would
It
would
is
it?
a natural process, in fact, yes, because we are not using any chemical synthesis. We are using microorganisms to do it just like in nature.
That is really cool. And I guess, I mean, that plays to a lot of strengths about the current trends for, consumers
Yes,
are wanting to move around away from synthetic processing. They want
exactly.
natural. Oh, okay.
And it's also sustainable because a lot of times, a lot of these processes can also use some substrates or raw materials which come out of as byproducts in several industries. Uh, Also, it's more energy efficient if considered or compared to other chemical synthesis, which a lot of times use petroleum products and petroleum byproducts. So
Real.
yes, it's sustainable along with fast as well, and you don't have to really depend on a lot of supply chain issues that we have seen happen lately. So yes, there's lots of advantages with such an advanced technology.
That makes sense because I guess in terms of sourcing and like you mentioned petroleum, petroleum gathering it is not inherently a very sustainable type of method,
Exactly.
but having something that's natural and such, like it gives the opportunity, correct me if I'm wrong, that you can really bring it to anywhere that you would want, given that you have the right like building conditions.
Yes, you need a lot of sophisticated equipment or processing facilities, but yes, that's all you need, and the rest of it is all you can easily obtain. And you don't have like these are very regular compounds which we use. A lot of times substrates are sugars, so and which is available everywhere in large quantities. So it's not really some niche product that you will have to struggle to obtain.
Well, that's really cool. And like, I'd love to know, that sounds like a very, I say biological, but I guess it really is. But like, how did you get into something like this? Or like, how did you even find out that you wanted to do it? I know that you did a PhD, so I guess this would be probably the perfect opportunity to maybe, if you could maybe walk us through your career journey, starting from why you decided to do a PhD to what your PhD was, and then walk us through those steps.
Sure. My initial school education and college education was not in Canada. I'm an immigrant. I'm originally from India. I completed my master's there and I was applying for a lot of PhD options in Canada and I got into McGill and my topic of interest was plant biotechnology. So my PhD is in plant sciences, but my focus of dissertation was more into applied biotechnology, and I worked on. A lot of people might be aware about CRISPR. CRISPR is a gene editing technique which was developed a few years, a decade ago now. So my PhD topic had a lot of CRISPR gene editing in it. Along with that, I also had a lot of bioinformatics that I did it during my dissertation. So my topic was on potato and a pathogen that troubles potato production, I mean potato crops, which is called as intestines, and it causes a disease called as late blight in potato. So my broad theme was trying to understand why some strains of potato is able to fight these disease and some are not. So I was trying to more understand this on a pathway level and trying to understand how different metabolites play a role in fighting against this particular pathogen in potato crop. So yeah, that was a broad topic. And yes, that's about my PhD dissertation. But after my PhD, I was more inclined towards applying to positions which are not in academia. I think very early, I would say not very early, but in the mid of my PhD, I realized that I'm more suited for something more industry and applied sciences rather than going into academia. That was my focus. So I started shaping my expertise that way. I tried to acquire lots of businesses and things like that. And that yeah, that's how my PhD went. But it when I tried to get into industry, it was not as easy as it seemed for sure because yes, I did. It was not like position was offered to me right away after my graduation. It wasn't that easy. So what I actually did was after my PhD dissertation was about to end, I was submitting my thesis. I did an internship with a business school, with Ivy Business School in the University of Western Ontario. So my internship was very focused on business side of things, but it did have a lot of science and plant biology attached to it. So if I could just explain quickly about it,
For sure.
so it was something about circular economy and how food industries and food and agricultural industries try to generate new products or try to upcycle byproducts or waste from other industries or from other companies. And I was trying to map it and try to understand what are the challenges in upcycling those byproducts or waste from one company to others. And yes, it was more towards agriculture and food sciences, but it was more on the business side of things and trying to understand the constraints, the challenges, and how industries treat these kinds of waste. Yeah, lots of aspects towards finding right way to use the byproducts and waste of agriculture and food industry. That was that's how I got into more business side of things, and then I applied to a few jobs. I got it that I was working for a bit in cannabis industry, which was very interesting and very close to also my PhD topic because plant sciences is what cannabis industry does. But I was into product development, I used to develop a lot of cannabis infused edibles and products. So yes, I got a lot of understanding about business in that field. So that's been the journey.
Congratulations on, taking each step of those journeys. I could imagine that there was some difficulties along the way, but
Yeah.
I'm actually really impressed at how I would have never expected you to say business. Like, you think PhD, you would naturally do maybe like a postdoc that's more technical. Like, I feel like that's a natural step that a lot of individuals do take, but you did get into like a more of the business side. So how did you find out about that opportunity?
It was not that opportunity was advertised somewhere or something like that. Not That's not how it works. I was just trying to see what because it was an internship, so I could apply to anywhere, any industry or academia. So the internship actually I could do it anywhere, and I happened to just read about a few articles published by one of the professors working at Ivy Business School, Yuri Gladwell, and he was working on circular economy in food industries. So that's how I got into there, just like cold emailing and trying to see if there is an opportunity. And it was more like something that I was interested in. I was really interested in that topic, and I knew that I could learn a lot if I do something on the business side of things. So that's how it was. It wasn't really an opportunity that was advertised or something like that. It was cold emailing. And I think that's something to know that a lot of times it helps. Maybe there is no opportunity that you see advertised somewhere, but there are opportunities which people can create if they feel that you're interested in something or uh, you're motivated to do a certain role or you're motivated to do a certain project. So it's never harmful to write a cold email to someone if you think that you're interested and motivated to do.
I think that's a really good point because I know as much as everyone says to network, and I fully agree. Like, I mean, networking has given me some opportunities. I've also, in the past, when I was looking for my first co-op position, no, sorry, not my first co-op position, it was my fourth one. I don't know. I was just really struggling to find a co-op. And I ultimately was emailing everyone. And I eventually did find a company that I had cold emailed them to at least just give me an interview. And I mean, ultimately, I didn't get the role. But the fact that they even entertained me just through an email, and they're like, no one's ever emailed me for a co-op position before. And I was like, oh, I guess it worked. So I guess there is some merit into doing that.
I would say yes, there's a lot of merit. And a lot of times what happens is maybe they don't have, a lot of people may not have positions right away. But if you are in touch with them, at certain point, there may be a position and they will remember you. That's the best part about cold emailing and networking. It may not happen instantaneously, or sometimes if you're lucky enough, it may even happen instantaneously. But yes, it always helps. But and not cold emailing will never land you anywhere for sure.
Mm-hmm.
That opportunity is gone.
Yeah, and then as well, I guess thinking about like manufacturing, if you do choose to go into food processing, but I could imagine this applies to every industry, is that if you have your email or you've cold emailed them in the past to the point that you just made, by having it on file, it might save them a little time because then they don't have to put out a job description and all that. And if they see that you like match, they're like, oh, I don't have to spend all this work.
Exactly. Yeah, that's true. And a lot of times industries don't even advertise something, even if they know that they want this position. And if they find the right candidate, and if they see that you as a candidate are motivated enough to take up a project, they can even offer you something part-time or something to start with, some hurdle to start with. And then maybe you'll be reinstated into a more regular position. So it's not that they may offer you immediately. They will first test you. They'll first see that, okay, are you motivated enough to do the job? And maybe when the right time comes, they will offer you the position that you have been waiting for. So never say no to something that comes your way. That's what I feel is the right thing.
I think that's really good advice, especially for those who've maybe, chosen the academia route and maybe, did their undergraduate, went straight to master's, went straight to PhD. You don't have as much, work experience, just basically have the path that you've done. And even at getting your foot in the door with the part-time work, it can lead you to, places you don't really know that was going to happen.
I agree, but I just have one reservation, and I know a lot of people call this, but PhD or even an advanced degree in master's, a lot of people consider this as education and not just work experience. But in my opinion, it's very close to working in a full-time job, especially with PhD, because you do a lot of things that you can still put up in your resume as work experience. Like, for example, managing student interns or managing your incoming new graduate students or training them, or maybe if you have any interns coming into labs, like training them on a lot of different aspects. So this is kind of a more supervisory role that a supervisor in any manufacturing or any other industry does, right? So my understanding is it's not only like education that you take in PhD, it's also some work experience that you do. A lot of people who are in academia do a lot of teaching assistantship, and that's also a work experience because teaching is work. It's not something that you just do for learning, you teach. So I feel it's just about perception, but I do understand that industries do not consider PhD as work experience because they do not understand what people do in PhD. A lot of industry hiring managers or even people working in industry, they do not understand what a student does during a PhD. So the onus is on the student to make them actually understand what you have done in a PhD or during your time in PhD or master's certificate. So it's about tuning your language so that it's understandable for them. for industry people. And it's about convincing them that, okay, you have done these tasks and just packaging it in a different way would, I think, make more sense to even the reader or to the hiring managers who read the resume with you or your cover letter as well. So it's about convincing them and writing it in the right manner. That's something that I feel is very important for people in academia, for students right now who are in academia.
There's so many places I want to take this, but I don't know. My mind is blown right now because, I feel so silly that I've never even realized it. Like, I have always thought about that. I do feel my PhD is a lot. It's more like work than school because I don't take courses anymore. I don't, I go in, I set up experiments, I run them. But the training aspect, like, I've never thought about it that way because, for many individuals too, you're training a lot constantly because there's a lot of rotations of, undergraduate students who may come into your lab. And the more that you stay in a lab, the more senior you become, and you start to be the one who acquires the skills, and you tend to be the one who starts training individuals. And, a lot of this equipment is not cheap. It's very expensive, so that you're trusted on it. But yeah, that's such an applicable skill in the workplace, being able to train someone. Companies want to be able to know that they can trust you to train the next oncoming and onboarding. Like, that's a really good skill.
Exactly, I agree. It didn't come to my mind as well. Initially, when I was applying, I was more crude and trying to project my PhD achievements. Oh, I've done these projects, I've managed to publish here, and a lot of good achievements for sure. A lot of PhD students struggle during their PhD to achieve this, and they should be proud about it. But when you're talking to someone in industry, they would not understand the value of a publication in itself. Some people may. I'm not saying it's across the board, but a lot of people who are trying to hire you may not really value it as much as you yourselves do. So you have to offer them what they value the most, and they value a lot of training, and they value a lot of supervisory roles, managing people. So yes, and you already have it. You just have to project. That's what I feel is very important.
No, I was going to say I got to steal this. Well, I shouldn't steal it, but I'm like, okay, this is really good. It's going on my resume now.
It should. It will. I'm sure it will help. The other thing, Veronica, if I may just diverge a little bit from more like training part of your PhD to something about project management as well, because PhD is not just one project. It's managing different aspects and trying to progress through lots of purges and trying to manage a lot of people, your collaborators, maybe your supervisor, your advisory committee, and lots of different people, lots of different variables, lots of hurdles. So project management is again another aspect that a lot of PhD students anyway do. It's a part of a PhD. And I think if it is projected in such a way that people understand, okay, how you have managed a product, what are the complexities of it, how did you find ways to take up these problems, and how did you solve it? So if you're putting it or packaging it in a project management way, industry people might understand it better rather than just projecting your skills in a scientific manner. So that's again another aspect of it that a lot of us can do, which we anyways do in PhD. It's not that nobody is like away from it. Everybody has some aspects of project management in their PhD that they do.
That's a really good point. And as you've been talking, you mentioned publication, and I think that's another really good point to bring up, just even that, because we think for many, like, PhD is about publishing and such. And I'll admit, I'm even learning the intricacies of publishing, and I could imagine that unless maybe an HR manager is very in tune with that, a lot of people might not understand that, even applying to publications in a sense could be similar to that of maybe things that might happen in a startup culture, maybe what's the word that I'm trying to say? Applying for a grant or even applying for regulatory. When you publish a paper, it's not simply you give the paper to the editing company, they say, yes, we like this and we're going to publish. It's, you have to submit the paper. It has to go through revisions. They come back to you. They communicate with it. Sometimes they don't agree with your ideas, even though you feel very strongly about them, and you have to defend your ideas, or you have to rework it based off of what the journal says. And these are a lot of, I could imagine, even in skills in the workplace, if you go to a business meeting creating a new product, not everyone's going to agree with what you put out. You're going to have to almost negotiate or really put down your ideas, but other times you might have to take in ideas and change it. And that is similar to what publishing a paper is like, ultimately, to get it out there. So never thought about it that way.
Yes, I know a lot of times we don't think it at the moment that we are applying, but doing a lot of applications, trying to talk to people who are in the industry and trying to understand their point of view, what they want, would I think help in this case, because it's all about mutual understanding of the language, right? If you're talking something, if you just talk in a language that academics understand, you may be having all the skills, you may be a stellar candidate, but you're not talking the same language that the recruiter is understanding, or the HR person is understanding, or maybe a hiring manager is understanding. So it's all about projecting it in the right sense and in the right words and language. That really helps or increases your chances that your CV will be seen and you'll be taken cognizance of. That's something to note.
Well, one thing I wanted to, so this relates to this, but I wanted to cycle back to something that you had mentioned earlier, was that when you did your internship that was business based with the Ivy School, you mentioned that also halfway through your PhD, you realized that it wasn't, you could see yourself wanting to go to that industry side. And now that you are on the industry side and you're on that business side, what have you noticed is different about, like you said, the language right now? So what have you noticed is different between working in academia through your PhD and business? How are those work environments different?
That's a very interesting and very important question, I would say, because if I may put it in very plain and simple example, let's say for a PhD, we have a project and we know we are solving a problem. And there's we don't have unlimited resources. Nobody has it, but we always have a lot of resources that we can use. We don't have hard deadlines, even though we have to complete this project and we cannot take forever, but they're not as hard as industry deadlines are, because during your PhD dissertation or your academic projects, it's more like a very lenient wherein you can try different solutions and just project which one works. Or maybe you can find 10 different ways to solve a problem. And you can say, okay, these are the 10 and that's it. You don't have to nail one which is the best. But that's not how industry thinks, or that's not how industry works. So first of all, you'll have to have a holistic approach when you're looking at a problem. You'll have to look at cost aspects of it. You have to look at the labor aspects of it. You have to look at the time. And you don't have endless solutions to offer. You will, at the end of the day, one solution to a problem that will be implemented and it will affect your product that will go into the market. People will buy it, and then it's like a real life product. It's not something that you're just making assumptions about or conclusions about, like in an academic paper. So a holistic approach to a problem is very important when it comes to industry or solving problems in industry rather than academia. Academia, we have lots of ways to work around it. We have time. We can try different things, but that's not what industry is. Industry, the resources are limited. Your time is limited. Your money is limited. You do not get to try 10 different things and just come to a conclusion. You will have to think strategically and just find one solution to a problem and go about it. That's how industry works. And I think it's very important for academics to change their course of thinking a little bit to accommodate yourself in the industry. That's very important. And I think that can lead to a lot of, you can overcome a lot of hurdles by doing that.
What you're saying is so important to know, but it sounds so frustrating to know too. It's so funny that you say it that way because when you're a PhD, it's very, you feel like you have the hardest deadlines you've ever experienced in your life. Like, I know you have your undergraduate, of course, with like your weekly things, but you go to your master's, you go to your PhD, it's like you have a project, and 4 years doesn't seem like a lot of time because it isn't, but comparatively, even to industry, it is a long time. I mean,
Yeah.
companies move fast, and there can be companies that have their whole life cycle gone in by like typically PhD is 4 years. So many companies can, if they don't do things correctly, they're gone in 4 years. Like they're not even doing next steps. At least there's a little bit of, if you fall behind maybe a month even in a PhD, you can make it through. Even longer you have that, but I don't like to hear about that with industry.
I know it's a little frustrating truth, but that's the truth. And the other thing to note is it's not as bad it is. It's not that everybody in the industry is just behind you to solve problems. No, it's a teamwork. That's another aspect, the good aspect of it, rather.
Mm.
Because a lot of times, PhD, you're all by yourself. You are managing your academic work, you're managing the lab, you're trying to write grants, you're trying to complete all the academic necessities that has to be done or prerequisites that has to be completed. So it's all by yourself. It's your project. It's only you who will do this. But industry is not you alone. It's a teamwork. So it's also good. And I think industry departments, if it's a big company, a lot of departments, a lot of other people to help you solve problems. It's not just by yourself that you're doing it. But what I feel is important is to change your mindset in a way that you have to think holistic. That's very important. And yes, you're not alone when you're working in industry. That's also a sweet thing about
Okay. Oh, okay. Maybe that sounds a little bit nicer.
it.
That's good. Did you find that for yourself personally, you've been speaking to all these types of things. Did you find difficulties with this transition going from that academic space to industry? Like, was there anything that you really had to overcome yourself that you're even now trying to get through?
Yes, that is true. I'm still trying to overcome my scientific mindset. Even now, I sometimes think as a scientist. I think as a person who is from science background and not really a business person. A lot of things, it, it even today it comes, but I think it's just transition, and it's not even bad. Sometimes you will have to think like a scientist. It's not that scientists think differently, just that their approach might be a little different. So it's not bad, and people understand it. Sometimes it's appreciated as well, and it's necessary. So don't give it up. Just that you'll have to learn to transition between a scientist and business thinking whenever it's needed. So you need that switch. And I think to get that switch, it'll take time. Even I'm for myself, even I am still learning. It's not that I've perfected it or mastered it. I still have this dilemmas on how and what approach to look and how to think in two different mindsets. But yes, it happens. It happens gradually, and it's not that difficult.
Hmm. I'm just thinking about it because again, I've been very much through part-time work or even doing the product development in the sense that that scientific mind, sometimes I find it's very easy as a scientist to get very caught up in your own way of thinking that you forget that not everyone thinks like you. Like not putting yourself on a pedestal or any of that type of thing, but you have a way you've been taught since if you did it like a science degree, and this might be different with other PhDs, but with a science degree, you've been taught the scientific method. You have a problem. You go do X, and then if X doesn't work, you go through Y. And that's just how you approach a problem. And you kind of forget that there's other ways of going about things. And to not feel uncomfortable, like it's okay to feel uncomfortable, but it doesn't mean that if someone thinks differently than you, it's not a personal attack or anything. It's just
No.
a different way of communicating.
Yes, that's very important, Vivek. I feel it's important even in general life, right? Like criticisms is not always something about you, but rather it's just a different way of thinking. And I think that's when, I mean, when people try to come up with different ideas, that's when you actually synthesize a better solution. So it's very important to keep your mind open to criticisms, open to people who can think differently and appreciate that and try to understand what are the good things or what are the important things about other perspectives. And I think that's when you can find the solution. It's very important in industry and for that matter, even in general life, like, you have to be open about it. And I think it's very important for PhDs or advanced degree grads to understand this when they are transitioning, that they have to learn by other people's perspective. That's where the knowledge is.
Well, to that note, and actually one of the things that I did want to talk to you, when I had recently gone to a networking event where I was representing food grads, but I was really fortunate to speak to a lot of different PhDs who are maybe like in their first year, or sorry, not their first year, their last year. They're going to be transitioning out really soon. And one of the things that a lot of them had mentioned was that they didn't want to, maybe they were doing a PhD on food safety, for example, and they wanted to break out into industry, but they didn't want to go into a QC position or QA position. They wanted to go into something that was more of a senior position. And I just want to get your opinion on that because I don't know. Do you think that PhDs should be expecting to get a non-entry level position when they graduate? Or is that, should that be an expectation, or should they push to really get a position that's more in that field?
This is a tricky question because a lot of times, and it's a case-based scenario. So I wouldn't say that everybody thinks the exact some similar way, but a lot of times people do offer you higher positions if you're a PhD because they understand the work that you have done in your PhD or during your PhD. But that's a very minuscule minority in industry because a lot of times people don't understand. So if you're lucky, you will get a higher position. But instead of, I would say in a very more realistic scenario, instead of waiting for that position for 6, 8 months or maybe a year, why not get to a lower position, work your way through, and trust me, it's always true that a PhD will shine in that scenario because they have those skills. They may not be just projected on your CV in the way that people understand, right? But you do have those skills. You just have to go work even at a lower position or entry level position and prove your part. It's as simple as that. It's just anyways waiting for 6, 8 months or a year, finding the right position, get to an entry level, work your way through, and then your chances of getting into a higher position is higher than just waiting for it. That's what my understanding or my perspective of it is. But nevertheless, I would say that it's no harm that you aim for not an entry level position, you aim for a higher position, which is totally true. You've worked hard for your PhD, you've done a lot, you've achieved a lot. There's no harm in expecting that, but that's not the reality how it works because it will take you time to get to that position. Unless otherwise that the company that you're applying to exactly works on the work that you have done with PhD and you're going to a more scientific role, then yes. But if you're going to operations role, if you're going to any other kind of roles in the industry, then I think you'll have to work your way throughout. That's what my take on it is.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I think it's good to hear different perspectives. I'd love to actually ask another individual the same thing just to hear what they're saying because I do like how you said it was a case-by-case basis because I've, again, when I was doing this event and I'm representing food grads and I'm by no means an industry expert or any of that time. And I was just like, I don't really know what to say to you because I don't know the answer, which being honest, but hearing, I guess case by case basis is a good way to look at it because different organizations, I guess, look at different things. And I mean, everyone is different what they did for their PhD, depending on their coursework or their past experience. And yeah, I don't know. I don't know where I'm going with that, but I guess it's something to
No,
think about.
yes, it's something, and also one more thing, we're looking to notice a lot of times as a PhD, you're more suited for an R&D role, or for that matter, like more scientific role, even in any industry, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's your expertise. So you can contribute more to a R&D project or R&D team. But R&D team is smaller in any industry you take. It's the smallest team of all. So there's lots of competition there. And the other good thing to do would be to get into company, even at any other position, at an entry level position, but you are inside the pool, and whenever there is an opportunity in R&D or higher up, you will be considered the first because you're already in. You're a part of the team, and your chances of getting hired is much higher there rather than just applying for a position when it opens up in
I
R&D or any other operations for that matter. So that's the advantage of getting inside first, putting that step in, and then it all works out.
That's a really that's another really good point to it because I'm really happy that I've had the opportunity at least to even do co-op positions to be, working QA on the floor, work QC to really get on the line and understand things because it really opened up my eyes to just have things work in the real world and just seeing like different languages of like operations and such because um I never would have thought prior to those co-op positions that I would actually like being in a processing plant because it's just like nothing I've ever been in before. I mean, you can work in the lab, but once you start to see the giant vats of things and the meat, the movement of the people and talk to different individuals and such, it makes you open your mind that things do not work out on paper. I mean, you could
Yes,
obviously see that with the lab work, but it, working in a manufacturing facility, like there's nothing like it. It just opens your eyes to scale, and I think that's another thing that I think most people who have done research also know is that going to scale is totally different than benchtop. Like you just don't get prepared for those kinds of things.
that that is well said because that's reality. It doesn't work as we think it is. We can prove a lot of things in lab on a bench scale experiment, but that doesn't translate to a large scale industry level operation. It's totally different. The dynamics of it is different. The pace of it is different, which we don't really realize sitting in the lab. And other thing is in a lab, okay, today it doesn't, this experiment did not work. That's fine. I can push it to tomorrow or next week or whenever my mind is right. But that's not how industry would take it. Industry would, no, you
Uh,
have to find a solution now because things are running and if it has to stop, it will cost us a lot. It will cost everybody a lot. So you cannot say that you can find a solution tomorrow or next week. You have to find it now. It's a fast-paced environment, and yeah, you'll have to. It's a learning curve. It's fun too. It's not that you'll not like it. I know it's a very fast-paced environment, but it's fun and it's nice to
I,
work in industry.
I am definitely not laughing at you. I'm just laughing at thinking about like your thought. Exactly
No,
what
I
you said
agree.
was something that I thought this week because I had something didn't work out, so I said okay, I'm gonna take a step back, think about it, and I'm gonna retry it tomorrow. And I'm just like, oh, I should really appreciate this time right now because it's probably not gonna happen in the future.
Yeah.
But well, like actually, if you mind me asking, I'm laughing at it, but you're clearly experiencing that type of thing right now. Like how do you manage that more fast-paced environment and like maybe thinking more quicker, so to say? Like how do you manage that currently?
My current role is not that fast-paced because we are a startup, and startup is a more relaxed role, but it's still fast-paced in academia for
Mm-hmm.
sure. It's not as slow as academia.
Yeah.
But my previous roles in manufacturing and R&D, they were very fast-paced. And that time, initially, I had a bit of an issue adjusting. I won't say that it was an easy task to just transition like quickly. I had to think it through. I had to make myself aware that, look, this is not something that I can postpone. This is not what I can easily do. A lot of things are dependent on it. So it's just changing yourself, training your mind to think like what is at my disposal right now and how I can find the solution right away with this. That's something that you'll have to train your mind to do. And it works. Also, when you join a company or you join a new role, you're not expected to perform everything right away, right? People allow you to learn, people allow you to make mistakes. That's given. There's someone to guide you along, there's someone to always train you. So it's not that you're expected to do everything by yourself, like in PhD. That's the good part about it, that people are there to show you the right thing, tell you the right thing, and also train you. So yes, there's help, unlike PhD, wherein you're just by yourself trying to figure out things for endless time. That's not how it works. And yes, that's a good part about it as well.
Well, it's good to hear that, you can change your perceptions and such. And I'm just being mindful of the time and such. So we are coming to the end of our show, and I always like to ask your guests a piece of advice and such. So I don't want to leave you without asking that. So I think I'm going to try to make it a little more specific this time. I know we've touched upon this before, but let's get really specific on it. And if you could give one piece of advice to a soon-to-be PhD graduate or a recent graduate of a PhD program who's looking to enter into the industry after academia, what piece of advice would you give?
If I would say one piece of advice, then it is, if you want to transition to industry, it's a nice work environment. You're not as stressed as you're in PhD. So take that as a good thing, and you'll be more relaxed in your new job rather than the stress of the PhD. So always keep that in mind and work for that. The other piece of advice is try to see how you can implement all the skills that you have learned during your course of PhD to a real life world problem. It's not that academic problems are the ultimate problems. There are more other problems, and try to imagine scenarios or try to work around some problems which are more real life based problems or more manufacturing problems, industrial problems, or any general real world problems, and try to imitate those solutions that you have learned or training that you've had in solving those problems, just in your head or your mind, or some exercise or something like that, just to train your mind to be ready for the new role that you're taking up.
Well, that's really great piece of advice, and I'm going to leave it there. Thank you so much, Sripad, for taking time to come on the show. I think that this has been a really great episode, just really honing in on that PhD experience, going into industry and such, because I think that it's a valuable conversation to have and have it out there, because I think that, people, it's a hard time doing a transition from, I could imagine going from any industry to something else. And the more knowledge that you have, and I hope that episodes like this really help those students that are listening out there. Thank you so much for taking time to come on the show. The one last question I have to ask before I do actually let you go is, where can people find you?
Yes, thank you, Veronica, for such a nice conversation. It was really nice to talk and also go back to those old days and see what wisdom I've got so far. So yes, it was great talking. I'm really glad that I can help others. And I know a lot of people do struggle transitioning into industry from academia. And I know that struggle. And I think if I can help anyone, it would be great. Anybody can reach me on LinkedIn, or yes, any other social media. But yeah, LinkedIn would be the best option to reach me at.
Amazing. I'll make sure to link that in the show notes so anyone can find that out. But once again, thank you so much for taking on the show. This was a great conversation.
Thank you very much. It was great talking.
That was episode 69 of the Food Grads podcast. All the notes to this podcast can be found by clicking on the Student and Grads tab on the Food Grads website. There you can find any notes to past or future episodes. Is there someone you would like us to interview on the show? Perhaps yourself. Or maybe there's a specific career path that you would like us to explore. Then let us know. You can email me at veronica.hislop, Hislop, and that's Veronica with the C, at foodgrads.com. Or you can reach out on any of our social media channels. So please ask your questions. We want to hear from you. A few months ago, I attended the Spill the Beans event put on by the University of Guelph's Food Science Club, where they essentially connected students within the programs across the University of Guelph and had professionals come from outside. So Nicole and I actually attended the event representing food grads and how we're supporting students and graduates. And I was actually quite surprised at the number of PhDs that came up to us and asked us questions. As you may know, although I do work with food grads, I am also a PhD myself. So I haven't quite made that transition over to a full-time job. I mean, I have worked in the food industry after I graduated, but not the side after my graduate degree. Again, I was really surprised by how many people came to the booth trying to find advice after they graduate. I know Food Grads has a lot of resources to support them, but something felt missing. I felt that we had the support resources, but I really wanted to have more stories of those who have actually made that transition so we can really give good advice. So when I met Sripad, I jumped at the opportunity to get him on the show. I think that he has performed many feats that the individuals who came up to the booth were asking, especially coming to Canada from India, completing a PhD, and taking that leap to industry. For many, Sripad has completed what I think many individuals consider to be the dream. But I think you might have noticed that it came with a lot of self-reflection and figuring out where he fits in. Science is awesome. However, not everyone understands that, so you need to translate your skills and your knowledge into something that others will understand and figure out how you fit into different dynamics. Sripad did such a good job explaining that throughout the episode, and I really think that's advice you should take if you are in the same position or you will be in the future. Our food system needs all different kinds of people to succeed, so take time to reflect and see what you've done. Like Sripad put it, a PhD is work. It's not going to school and take courses. You didn't just sit in front of a computer for 4 years and do these things. No, you were experimenting. You were training others. And I apologize if I'm focusing on the sciences. It's just generally where the PhDs in the food space generally sit. But this does also apply to those doing more computer-based, technical, analyzing data. There's a lot more to it than just being by yourself in a room for 4 years. No, there's a lot more. So you have to be the one to really explain that to others, because think about yourself in your first year of your PhD. If you're like me, you didn't really understand what a PhD was at the time, like proposals, all that, but you really, as you continue to go on, you start to learn. You went to conferences, you started to write, you started to meet new people, you started to train, you started to look at different techniques. Like, these are all skills that are very valuable in the working world. But those who have not gone through a postgraduate or know someone who's been in it might not understand that. So you really have to do your work and show how you're different in these respects. So keep that in mind. Again, thank you so much, Sripad, for sharing these types of things in as well. Anyways, that's it for this week's episode. Thank you everyone so much for listening, and I will see you next time.